And I see Akila is going to. Okay, thanks so much. Hey, welcome everybody to the Master Liberal Arts Alumni webinar or panel or whatever we want to call it. It's a fun opportunity for a really cool recipients of the Master Liberal Arts degree, recent alumni, to talk to some of you about what they did in the program, how they built their concentration, how it related to their daily life while they're in the program, and kind of what it means to them now afterwards. So I hope it's really helpful and informative. We will record this session so that folks can see it later as well. If you have any questions along the way, please feel free to put them in the Q&A or put them in the chat, and we'll try and get to them very quickly as we go along if there's anything that comes up. But if you think of something as one of the panelists is speaking, certainly type it in the chat or type it in the Q&A so you don't forget to ask that question later. Normally, I like just go in alphabetical order because it keeps it simple. But I know, Alan, you said you have to drop off a little early. So I think if it's okay, Alan, maybe I'll ask if he could go first and tell you a little bit about his program. Alan Majewski served as the president of Noramco since 2019. Previously, he was a chief financial officer and has been serving in that role since September 2017. He's also the group CFO covering two other SK Capital-owned businesses in addition to Noramco. Prior to Noramco, he was the executive VP of Nippon Steel and Sumitomo Metal Corp Standard Steel subsidiary, and been doing that since 2011 with broad operational and financial responsibilities. He was Standard Steel's chief financial officer in 2002 and guided the company through two successful private equity ownership cycles. In 2011, he oversaw the sale of Standard Steel to Sumitomo Metal Industries and Sumitomo Corporation. Before his time at Standard Steel, he spent 5 years at PricewaterhouseCoopers Pittsburgh audit practice. In November 2006, the Pittsburgh Business Times awarded Alan their 2006 CFO of the Year Award in the large private company category. In 2007, he received an Alumni Achievement Award from Penn State University. He's a 2021 MLA graduate from Penn. He's also a 2002 MBA graduate from Penn State's Smeal College of Business, and he holds a BS in accounting from Grove City College and is a certified public accountant with an inactive license. But that's the only inactivity I think we could qualify you with, right, Alan? It takes my breath away just reading your bio. So I really appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule to talk to us.
Well, Chris, the MLA program was certainly, one of the most significant things that I've done during that period of time. So it's a real pleasure to be here and have the opportunity to talk to anyone who's considering the program. Being able to study at an institution like Penn was a really lifelong dream of mine, and it took me until a little bit later in my life than others to have the opportunity to do that. And I really use the word opportunity because that's what I felt the entire time that I was at Penn. It didn't let me down really in any way. The quality of the faculty and the coursework and my colleagues in class, the diversity of the student base was really awesome. And having an opportunity to really study what we wanted to study was a great part of the program. Just the other day, I was explaining it to someone, and they found it really interesting that you're in school and you really get to customize the program to align with what you're truly interested in. And I think that's rare in a lot of academic programs where, you have certain coursework that you have to take, and maybe you can sprinkle in some electives here and there. So I think the customization for me was the real selling point and the quality of Penn, why the MLA program fit for my needs. The schedule I found to be accommodating too. There are enough classes in the evenings and enough online classes that, I only took one ever at a time. That was all I could handle. And sometimes that felt like a bit too much, but everyone was really supportive about it. The professors and, working in group projects, people understood that, some of us were in the program, we're full-time students, and others maybe would take 2 classes at a time or 3 classes. Somebody like me, I was still working very full-time and, trying to squeeze in a class at a time. People were accommodating of that. So I think that's a great attribute of the program. I concentrated in art, culture, and society. And Chris, you were really instrumental in helping me formulate that. And it really took my interest, my natural interest in the history of art, but it broadened it to some of the underlying context of those works of art and what was going on culturally, politically, religious background in civilizations when paintings were created in the time periods that I chose to really focus. And it helped me learn about what my original interest was prior to the program, but it really broadened me and gave me some nice exposure to a whole lot of other topics as well, other than a strict interpretation of the history of art. My favorite classes, I had a lot of them, but I'm not just saying this, Chris, but the two that I took from you, the Venetian art and architecture and Michelangelo were probably my favorites and the most memorable. I think the discussion that we had was really something that I still think about. We had some very provocative readings that we would do before class, and we had a nice small group of maybe 8 to 10 students. The first one we were able to do in person. The second one, because of COVID, we did online. But we had great stimulating conversation and kind of reflecting on the readings and applying them to different topics that we were focused on in the class session. So that's something that was very memorable to me. I think the work-life balance I touched on already, that I think anyone can make it work. I was very, very busy in my career at the time that I did the program, but I felt like I had a lot of support. I had support from the faculty. I had support from certainly my family, who understood how important it was for me to be at Penn and be studying topics that frankly I had been interested in for 30 years, but didn't really, I wasn't able to fit into the corporate finance career path that Chris, you described earlier. So I got a lot out of it. I miss it. I don't always miss sort of the extra hours on top of a busy schedule, but certainly I miss the intellectual challenge and the opportunity to learn. I think if you're a lifelong learner, this program at Penn is the perfect place for you, because you can really, again, customize it and spend your precious time learning about what you really want to learn about. So for me, what I take away from it is certainly a broader way of thinking. And that doesn't directly apply to what I do for a living, but somewhere it has to seep in there and influence how I'm communicating with people. Certainly how I write. I became a better writer having gone through the program, and thinking more liberally and more broadly about almost an unlimited range of topics. I think that's what I took away from the program that benefits me professionally. And personally, I had a chance to learn, again, 30 years after I was an undergrad, about some things that I was really curious about and interested in, and had been really the whole time. And again, to have the chance to do it at an institution like Penn, it was a real honor. And again, the word that I use to sum it up is opportunity.
Great, thanks, Alan. Yeah, I think that's one of the key things that people do need to understand, and hearing from you and hopefully from everyone else, that it's not always easy to juggle a lot of things. But if everybody, and as you said, your family and the faculty and other students, if everybody's sort of on Team Alan or Team Student, so everybody gives a little bit and everybody recognizes that we can all be a little flexible, and then allow us to be dynamic in response. Doing something part-time while you're working full-time, or switching gears and go full-time after you've been working full-time for a while. Those are the kinds of things I think you can make work, but you need everybody on the same page. You need to think about why you want to do the degree and what it's going to give to you, so you get a sense of like the sort of emotional, intellectual, and personal, not just academic or professional ROI calculation. What am I going to take away from this in a couple of years, based on the time and money that it's going to take me to do the degree. And if you have all those conversations and think hard about it, then we try to, at the program level, figure out how to help make that happen from a logistical point of view. So it's always really great when folks who are busy, because we've been one of the few part-time degrees at Penn for a long time, going on 30 years now. And it's great that we still managed to make it work. We've resisted moves towards cohort models and time to degree clocks and all that, because then it allows folks a little bit more opportunity to just adjust as they go through the program. You don't have to know exactly how you're going to do it before you start. And we try to make sure that everybody knows that, and that sort of our job at the program administrative end is to say, all right, if your pace has to shift one way or the other, if your topic area of concentration or interest shifts after you take a class or two, let's figure out how to make that happen moving forward, because we don't assume any two students are really moving toward the same concentration, taking the same classes at the same rate. Everybody's kind of got their own, approach to the MLA. And hopefully then if we can make that work, then it also is the opportunity for you to figure out how it applies to the rest of your life outside the classroom, which is good. Thanks. I'm going to bring Emily on next. Emily Gorge is a practicing trial attorney in Chester County, Pennsylvania. She got a BA summa cum laude from Susquehanna University in 2014, and she got her JD from Wider University Delaware Law School in 2017. She earned her MLA from Penn in June 2022 with a specific focus on legal and political philosophy. When Emily isn't practicing law or serving as an arbitrator in Chester County, she's an active member of her community. She currently serves as a township supervisor for East Pikeland Township, an elected position, and she's the chairman of the East Pikeland Open Space Committee. She recently was appointed solicitor for Chester County Democratic Committee. In her free moment, she enjoys reading, travel, boating on the Chesapeake, and musical theater. Emily.
Thanks for the intro, Chris. Thank you also for inviting me to speak about the MLA program. I'm really excited to be here and share my experience. So when I started the MLA program, it was right in the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. So it was in fall of 2020. So we were starting midway through. And it was something I'd always wanted to do. I wanted to go back to school, and I wanted to spend time exploring some subjects in college and law school that I'd never really gotten to do before. And one of the main concerns that I had was where can I go that has a program that's part-time, so I can still work but then also attend classes. And my boss had attended Penn and had done the MLA program several years before I was considering it, and he told me all about it and said, this is perfect for your personality, and the structure offers flexibility for you in terms of how you want to design your curriculum, as well as balancing when you want to take the actual classes. So when I started in 2020, my concentration was really focused on storytelling and public speaking, because I wanted to be a more persuasive attorney, and I wanted to work with figuring out how to make my cases more compelling when I'm in front of a jury. And it started out that way, but then it quickly morphed into something bigger, because right in the middle of the program in the summer and fall of 2021, I ended up running for office as to be in my current position of township supervisor. And when I was elected, I've inherited a whole new set of problems that I had to solve. And one of them was really in managing people and learning how to work with really divisive political discourse. And I realized I'm going to have to change my focus so I can really study more about human instincts, how they work, how can I be more persuasive, and then also figuring out how people influence politics and law. And so in the end, my capstone really focused on all three of those things. And I really wanted to find a way to apply what I learned through to my actual position. So I actually did an independent study. It was one of my favorite courses I did here, where not only can you design your own curriculum, but you can also design a course. So I did an independent study with one of my professors through the philosophy department, and we focused on management and leadership and political conflict. So I had taken a specific problem that I was having in the township, particularly how to deal with a very volatile land development project and the public outcry against it, and figure out what do we have to do as a township to make sure the public is included in the discussion, and making sure that we have good enough outreach and transparency. So I used the class to really structure a blueprint for how our township can handle discussions about any kind of public project that's up for debate. And it was great because I learned so many new things about how to approach people, how to manage the politics that go along with these kinds of projects, because given the divisiveness of the politics now, everything is political, even to the point where filling in holes in roads draws a controversy, or acquiring open space. These were things that were never issues before basically 2016, and now everything's just political, and it's a breeding ground for infighting. So the blueprint, I still use the blueprint now. I'm almost, I guess, a year. I'm going to be 6 to 8 months out of the program, and I'm still using the blueprint and applying it to all of the new projects we're working on. So that was one of the great things that I learned, was that, wow, I have a direct application of my education to real world experiences. And the great thing also about the capstone project, which is what happens at the end of your MLA program, where you take what you've learned and you create a project of your own design. You can explore topics in greater detail. So I was able to really combine 3 courses that I had studied over during my time at Penn, and then connect them to the theme of politics and law, which was exciting. And as Alan had mentioned earlier, one of the great things is you can study all kinds of things that you probably had never even thought about. I'd never had the opportunity to study a course on witchcraft and gender in any college class or law school class, and it was offered here at Penn, and I ended up taking it, and it was part of my capstone project. So definitely, I think one of the main things is to not be afraid to try new things when you're in the MLA program, and to make sure that you don't limit yourself in opportunities, because even if you come into the program thinking you're going to focus on one thing, there's going to be external circumstances that may change your perspective and change your emphasis, which is what happened to me. It became something totally different in the end. And I think the other piece is to make sure you pace yourself. I did the renegade version of this, which was I took 2 classes at a time, plus was working a full-time job. So things got a little hectic in the middle of it. So you definitely spreading the courses out is probably is great for your sanity, and it will really help you create more control over your schedule. The other piece to emphasize too is that the MLA program is a major time commitment. It's going to be a time commitment from the sense of, if you're living outside the city like I was at the time in Valley Forge, I was commuting at least once or twice a week. And then it's also a commitment from the standpoint of homework and actual being in class time. So you want to make sure, as Alan had pointed out, that you are surrounding yourself with people that know what's going on in your life, and that they're very supportive of all the things you're doing, because you will need that as you go through the program, because the coursework is challenging, it's demanding, and you want to be sure you're dedicating enough time to make sure you complete it. And the last piece is there is challenge, there is rigor. And if you're one of those people that really likes a challenge, this is the perfect program. I was one of those people that really enjoys challenging myself and broadening my perspectives. So I was really thrilled to be able to do this and still work at the same time.
Thanks, Emily. I know you worked a lot with Steve Steinberg in the philosophy department. And one of the things that I remember when you started, you wanted to think about like maybe doing some creative writing and think about storytelling, since you were doing a lot of litigation. But it's also interesting when you get in a philosophy class, for example. I think you might have taken his course on political ideology and conflict, maybe.
Yes.
But I'm not sure. But Steve also is the kind of person that will say, but remember, writing for philosophy is even another language, different than writing for law, different than writing creatively, different than writing an academic paper in the humanities. So you sort of learn that in the common language of English, there's effectively all these sort of academic or disciplinary dialects you have to kind of manage to make sure that you're in the right voice to argue your case successfully and explain things that you want to do to push the thesis or topic that you choose. So it's really, I think, a great opportunity, both you and Alan said, to grow as like a writer and a communicator, and then think about how to sort of use those things as deliverables in the rest of your day. And I joke, we talked about it when you were running for office, because I'm involved with local politics as well. And people say, oh, well, it shouldn't be, it's just, it shouldn't be partisan, it shouldn't be political, but leaf collection's political in the sense of, is your local municipality going to collect your leaves? If they are, it costs tax money, which means everybody's paying collectively to get some really expensive equipment that none of us could buy by ourselves to collect the leaves. And then recycle them on a township property so that they're not actually being burned or anything like that the way they used to, and it becomes a resource for the community. But you have to figure out how to make all that stuff work and get as many people as possible on the same page. So it's this opportunity to build community, to create a really rich opportunity for dialogue, to hear different voices and then figure out how to move forward. So it's really kind of great to me. I mean, I'm an art historian, so it's kind of a little distant from what we do all day most of the time, but thinking about how we approach the landscape and how we approach gardens, one of my key areas of interest, just like what you did with your work, is thinking about how we relate to the natural world, and trying to take those sort of academic topics and move them into real world situations. And it's the kind of thing like doing my MA and PhD in art history, we didn't worry about that at all. So what's kind of great with the MLA, with all of you really amazing students, is that the connection of liberal arts content that seems academic and abstruse and maybe potentially irrelevant can be made remarkably relevant to our daily life, as long as we're being conscientious and sort of self-conscious and self-aware. So it's really great.
I think being flexible that was one of the main things I learned how to do. Is one of the challenges, I think, when you're in politics and when you're in law, is that both of those things move fairly slowly. So there's always the risk that you can become really entrenched in one perspective and one analysis. But when you're forced to think about things like in the philosophy, when we were studying political ideology, if you're forcing yourself to view the world from different perspectives, that's a much more effective way to actually solve problems, because then you're effectively listening to all the people who are important to and critical to the decision-making process. So it was one of the things I hadn't really realized about myself, was that, we always function on one track, usually in law. So you're goal-oriented, you know what your plan is, that you're advocating for one client. Well, what happens when one client turns into 8,000 clients when you do political representation? So that was one thing I hadn't really thought about until I started doing a lot of this research and figuring out how to work with all of the varieties of discourse that are out there. So that was a very useful insight for me.
Cool. Super, thanks, Emily.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask Jackie Jordan to speak next. Jacquelyn Jordan is a dramatist and writer from Philadelphia. Her work's been published in several print publications, including Scribes of Neota, Mystics, The Root Quarterly, and Pennsylvania's Best Emerging Poets, 2019. And digitally, she's been published in I Am Black, Sci-Fi, Short Edition, and The Plenitudes. Her play, This Is How We Tell Our Story, debuted in 2019 as part of the Five Shorts Project. Most recently, Jacquelyn was named a semifinalist in the Future is Female grant opportunity for her script, Divine Love, and received a grant from the Lenfest Institute for Journalism for her work in community radio. Jacquelyn's currently the project manager at the Dramatists Guild Foundation. Jacquelyn.
Hi, again, thank you so much for this opportunity. It's really wonderful to be here. I haven't seen you, Chris, in a really long time, so it's nice to see your face. Wow, so the MLA program was really interesting for me. I too did the Renegade version. I took 2 courses all year, all through the summer, fall, spring. And I also started right at the beginning of the pandemic. So I was working a full-time job, had to quickly switch to remote work, and then started the MLA program. And I mean, it started off just firing on all cylinders. It was an incredibly exciting time, but also a heavy time, because we had so much happening with the pandemic, with things closing, trying to transition to remote work, and then transitioning with coursework to strictly online. But I had incredible professors who were really, really supportive, because they had no idea what was happening either. So we were all kind of learning as we went along, which was really good. One of my favorite courses that I took was a course with Kitty Watterson, Writing and Remembering. And one of the reasons why I decided to do the MLA program is, like, I knew I wanted to write. There was like no question, I want to write, but I also want to do research. So how do you do both? And I think taking that class with Kitty Watterson, and then also taking a course with Jeff Johnson, Writing Through Music, those 2 were really incredible opportunities to do not only some storytelling, but also learn how to do storytelling in the space of academic discourse, which is really great. I had no idea like what I would do after this. I had worked in higher education, also in the nonprofit sector, And so this really wasn't like a career move for me or something I wanted to do to kind of advance in my career. It was really just as simple as I want to write, I want to tell stories, and I want to do research. That was really it. And so I kind of found my niche with taking Jeff Johnson's course, Writing Through Music. And I realized one of the things that was really important to me is my introduction to hip hop music. So I was sort of introduced to hip hop music at like 9 or 10 years old. And so I didn't realize that that had such a heavy influence on my life and the stories that I told. And so I got the opportunity through my capstone project to explore that a little bit more. I took Chris Raberman's course where we sort of walked through the whole capstone project and begin with the research proposal. And that course was really helpful because it really helped me flesh out the ideas. I had so many things popping off on all cylinders, and she really helped me to sort of take those ideas, concentrate them into something that can really work. Right. So instead of a 100-page, research paper, it became something that was more manageable. And so that course was really helpful as well. My last semester at Penn, I took just an off-the-cuff course on Octavia Butler. I had sort of gotten into science fiction, never really was interested in it as a kid, but just started reading Butler's work. And so this course really had a profound influence sort of on my writing, and I began to write more science fiction pieces. So that was really cool as well. Again, one of the coolest things about the MLA program is you get to meet people from everywhere. I mean, I've taken courses with judges, with lawyers, biochemists, all kinds of people from all different disciplines. And so what's really amazing about it is you find there's so much commonality in what you do, whether it's the social sciences, whether it's creative writing. You find that there's so much, it's not necessarily linear. You kind of flow together in the way in which you sort of work through your projects. And so that was a really cool thing. I mean, I think the judge was like in his 80s in my course. And so he was really cool, and it was really cool to talk to him about sort of storytelling and sort of what storytelling sort of means. And so that was really awesome. I've had the great opportunity to do a couple presentations of my work at a couple conferences, which is really dope. I'm currently working on a documentary on that same topic. So the capstone project has turned from just the capstone project to me presenting to get grant money, because you always need grant money. So presenting to get grant money, and now has morphed into an entire documentary. And so I'm really, really excited about that. And again, I really couldn't have done that without taking the courses that I've taken at Penn. And one last thing before I close, the importance of including personal narrative into academic and scholarly work was really the thing for me that kind of got this whole thing going. I always thought that scholarly work, academic work is very different from creative writing, and the two never mix together. But I was able to kind of incorporate some of those personal narratives, some of those personal stories into my capstone project and produce a really good piece of solid work.
Yeah, I think that's really great. That's a nice point to make, because we usually think of academic as always being the third person, distant, or 30,000 foot view, detached. But in a lot of cases, good scholarship and good writing oftentimes has to have a connection to what you're sort of passionate about, what you're invested in. And so your own identity, your personality can come out in scholarship. And we can be maybe not necessarily more informal, but at the same time be a little bit more individual in how we deliver content and talk about what things mean to us, not just what they might mean to our discipline that we're working on, for example. So I think that willingness to explore creative writing, but then explore other subjects across the academic landscape and liberal arts, and have those two things, as you say, those things flow together. Not just the students kind of coming together from different angles, but also the disciplines coming together, I think can make for a really rich opportunity. And I know I've seen a couple of your presentations. You did one on Zoom at our 2019 conference, I remember correctly. I think that was the one you did on hip hop, on women in hip hop. And she's not just a great writer, a performer. It was really spectacular. My colleagues on the AGLSP board at the time were really dazzled by your delivery. So I'm looking forward to that documentary coming out.
Thank you.
And hopefully there'll be more of that, which is really great. Thanks, Jacquelyn. Meghan Pane is here, and she received her undergraduate degree from Colgate University. While at Penn, she concentrated in socio-legal studies and history. She was inducted in the American Graduate Liberal Studies National Honor Society and also received honors from Penn for her research on Pennsylvania's first state prison for women. After graduating Penn, she worked for a law firm in New York City and is currently a law student at Rutgers University. Meghan.
Thanks so much, Chris. I'm so excited to speak with all of you today and talk about the MLA program. It's been great, listening to all these other alumni talk about their experiences in just this small group here. You can see there's so many different avenues you can take in just this one program. It was so cool to hear from you, Emily. Just I did sort of the reverse. Now that you're practicing law, I kind of used the MLA program to sort of bridge the gap between undergrad and starting my legal career after that, which I'm just on the cusp of doing now. Like Emily, I also took the witchcraft and gender course, so there must be some overlap there as well. But my main concentration that I sort of put together was socio-legal studies and history. I was a history major in undergrad, so that was something that I wanted to, continue my work on, but perhaps, add some layer and color to it and make it sort of applicable to what I wanted to do next, while, still engaging in some of the cool topics like witchcraft, which, hopefully doesn't come up in my professional career, but, never know. So the ability to kind of customize what classes you take was absolutely invaluable, and sort of charting your own map towards what you want to get out of the program. So I was able to take courses at the graduate level in history, of course, but also sociology, human rights, philosophy. I did a lot of courses in social policy, and also I took a few courses in the Masters of Social Work department. So I was taking classes with students who were studying to become professional social workers. So that was really cool that I had that opportunity, and learning alongside people who were very intimately involved with the sort of institutions I was studying at like a theoretical level. So that was really exciting as well. A big draw for me personally with the MLA program was the ability to do, really intense research alongside faculty at Penn. I had really supportive advisors who were really helpful to me throughout the research process. I ended up taking an extra semester to work on my capstone because it ended up being just this huge research project. And I was going back and forth to a bunch of different archives all over Pennsylvania, and Penn ended up giving me an honorarium to sort of fund that because I was doing a lot of archival research in the field, which was really cool as well. My capstone, as Chris mentioned, was about one of the first all women's prisons in Pennsylvania, and I looked at the kind of ideas that shaped why that came to be, why they ended up segregating by gender, and the sort of different policies that dictated life for those women and how that influenced their outcomes once they were released. So that was a really exciting opportunity, and that I've found has been really invaluable to me, both professionally and now that I'm in law school. When I worked at a law firm in between, that was something they were really interested in, was that research and writing experience, and just really being able to think from a variety of lenses and apply, look at small facts and details and apply that in a broader sense to arguments and just critical thinking as well.
Great. How's law school going so far?
Oh, it's good.
It's good.
But well trained from Penn.
Super. Well, thanks, Meghan. Yeah, I think that's one of the great things that a lot of people undercount is that you don't necessarily have to pursue professional training to have good professional outcomes. One of the things is to be open to continuing to learn, continue to grow your skill set, and maybe just being experimental and exploratory and broadening your horizons, and then allowing your brain, especially when you're being light on your feet intellectually, to figure out where those connections are and how you can use things outside of the classroom. And that's the one really great thing about having a group of alumni who did something very differently in their programs on to share is kind of confirmation that there's no one way to do the MLA. And that's one of the things I think that makes it really a fun program. There's also not any one or two ways to use the MLA. People are like, well, what kind of jobs do people get after they get the MLA? And well, a lot of folks already have a job, and they may just ultimately, without even thinking about it, be better at their job. Other people switch careers because they learn new things, which I think is a lot of fun too. There's a lot of opportunity out there, but I think it's also kind of great to just disassociate what you're learning from the workplace maybe, and just consider the world, the social context, what's happening historically, what's happening in contemporary events, and just learn a little bit more about how other people think and how other people in other communities do things, because that gives you a different way to approach things outside of the workplace that you need to do to get from morning to night through your week. So I think the MLA gives you a lot of opportunities to kind of just get out there and as Jackie said, be in class with a really diverse group of students, to meet some really cool faculty that teach classes here at Penn, and to just learn things that you never had time to learn before, and kind of sink your teeth into some new content, which is a lot of fun. But I also think it's great that, unlike a lot of other programs, you don't have to do it full time. We're still 85% part-time, and that's been historically the case for a long time. We're a program that has, a broad range of different age groups and backgrounds, demographically, ethnically, and internationally in the program, which is kind of good because then there's all these different perspectives coming into the classroom, which I think is a lot of fun as well. Super. Let me see if there are any questions from anybody in the audience. I don't see anything in the Q&A, and there's nothing in the chat. So I think we must have satisfied their curiosity. And I'm hopeful that since we recorded this, we can share this with some of the other people who are prospectively interested in the MLA, and some of our current students who are also thinking about, especially if they're early in their program, how's this going to shake out? How do you build your concentration? How do you pick your capstone, and what's it mean, outside the workplace? And it can give them some good insight into how it worked for you folks as you work through the thing. Jonathan just asked how developed was the research interest when you started the program. I think he might be asking you, Meghan, because you closed. So maybe you want to mention that, answer that?
Sure. I knew I wanted to do research, but I definitely didn't have a sense of what in particular I wanted to research. I ended up kind of developing my capstone based off of a paper I did in one of my MLA courses. It was like a gender and history seminar that was really exciting. So I wrote a paper for that. And then that, living in Philly, I, went to go visit the Eastern State Penitentiary as just like little touristy day. And that sort of like the paper about women's incarceration and, visiting that in Philly, I came up with the idea and noticed that a lot of women weren't mentioned, in the museum and any of the stuff. And I became curious about where they were in this time period, because obviously they were somewhere. So I brought that back to my professor and told her about it, that I was interested in maybe looking into that. That's not something I had ever, had any background in. And she led me in the right direction, research-wise and reading materials. And I had really helpful advisors for my capstone that helped kind of develop something that was just something that I noticed was interesting into a full-fledged research project.
Yeah, that's cool. Now, I don't recall, had you thought about studying law before you started the MLA, or did you get interested once you started doing more things that touched on things legal in the program?
I was always interested in, doing law school afterwards.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of my express purpose in doing the program as well.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And that makes you think, Jacquelyn, you've been doing different kinds of writing, scripts, screenplays, short stories, not, and other kinds of sort of academic writing as well. How much had you done a lot of writing before you started the program?
I did. I've been writing probably since I was about 10 or 11 years old. And then, life happens and you stop doing those really cool, imaginative, creative things. And so it actually was a course I took at Community College of Philadelphia. I took a writing course over there and it just completely blew my mind. And I was like, I need to do this every day. And it was difficult to find the time to do any of that type of creative writing. So I took a script writing course there, and I took a fiction course, and I took a poetry course. And it just became really difficult to find the time and just to have the discipline to be able to just write every day. And so, I'm working, go to Temple, finish Temple, woohoo, graduate, and then, end up coming to Penn. And it was so writing intensive that it required me to actually sit down and write every day. And so as I'm taking these sort of courses and writing papers and reading, and I forget who mentioned how rigorous the work really is. It is a tremendous amount of reading, a tremendous amount of writing, tremendous amount of research. But when I got to the capstone project, it was kind of like, okay, I can totally do this, right? It's not as daunting as it seems when you first walk in the door to think you have to produce this piece of work. And what I was able to do with the capstone project was really, again, create my own thing, right? So there's a research component, but then I took about 20 original pieces that I had written throughout my coursework and then new pieces that I had written, and I added those in and sort of created an archive. So I had the academic piece, and then there was sort of an archive of my own work. And again, because I love hip hop music, I created it like an album. And so the project reads and the archive reads as an album. So each portion of my writing is a track. And so just coming up creatively with that kind of stuff and having Jeff Johnson be sort of my mentor and advisor in that space and supporting me. Don't ever think that your professors will not really push you in the space of getting this capstone done, because you think you've got, oh, it's great, it's cool, I'm just going to work with Jeff Johnson, we're buddies. No, he made it even more difficult because I had to produce pieces of work for him. And so I had to create my own syllabus. I had to do all of these sort of checklist type of things to get this project done. And I don't think if he had not pushed me to do that, I do not think I would have been as successful with the project. And I don't think I would have gotten it done on time. So that's another added portion to it, that you're not really alone when you're creating you're doing the capstone. There are tons of people that will lend their time and lend their talents to help you and support you in that area.
Yeah, especially if you have a instructor that you take a class with and you bond with them over shared interest in the material, and then you recruit them to be your capstone reader later. You're sort of already on a team. It's not an individual event. Within reason, you still got to, churn out the pages, but you have someone else who's invested in the quality of those pages and what they mean after the fact, which I think is really great. But it's also kind of good because there are a lot of folks out there who are in book groups and they're taking the occasional certificate course or an online course or trying to learn their own, going to museums, what have you. And that can be really enriching, but there's a level oftentimes of engagement and rigor that can kind of be missing. So yeah, you might have to invest a little bit more time to come and do graduate level work in some of those subjects. But then if you take a creative writing course in the MLA, we're one of the few places at Penn where you can do graduate level creative writing, or you take a gender studies course, the witchcraft course, you take a course on political ideology and public discourse or something, you're going to be asked to read a lot of things and then write papers about that content, but you're going to be on a whole nother level of engagement with the material, which then oftentimes means that you take in more, but also you process more as you digest all this material you're reading and develop enough knowledge and enough fluency with that content to write a really interesting paper, whether it's a creative piece or an academic piece, that oftentimes then sticks with you well enough that you can use it later, even when you might not have thought you were going to use that content particularly later. But that's also where I say, take it on, but make sure that's also, as rigorous as it is, it's kind of fun. It's fun to do that reading. It's fun to discuss those ideas in the seminar. It's fun to have one-on-one with a professor and go through your material as you're developing ideas for independent study or a capstone and write that thing up. Because the more fun it is, the more you internalize not just the process, but the content. And then the more likely you are to be able to take that on the road and use it later, which I think I'm really proud of the MLA students every year, because they're not just surviving or getting over a speed bump on their way to another professional credential. They're actually really fully invested in the learning experience, which I think then drives so much better outcomes, which is really rewarding.
I felt one of the challenges, since we're discussing the capstone, was, well, obviously it was coming up with the topic, but then when you're within your topic, I had the challenge, I sort of ended up doing a case study with mine. So I was looking at the Salem witchcraft trials and January 6, 2021, and how human instincts and ideology really play a role in group violence. And January 6th was so new that there wasn't any research on it. So one of the challenges I had was trying to figure out, how am I going to talk about this and piece the project together. So I had to really rely on media outlets and newspaper articles and some of the early research that had happened basically in the immediate aftermath, because the January 6th congressional hearings hadn't happened yet. Boy, would those have been helpful when I was writing that project. I was just too soon. But that was one of the interesting things, was learning how to research a topic when it's brand new, and figuring out how you're going to work that subject matter into your project. And I found that when I worked on some of the historical pieces that had happened, it was a lot easier to start with them first, figure out what the connections and overlap were between the different areas I was exploring. So then I was able to I knew exactly what I was looking for, because the problem was, when I just started with the January 6th writing, it was just a massive amount of newspaper articles, and you had to figure out, what am I going to do? What am I going to focus on with all this? Because there's so many different things you could write a paper on or focus your project on. So that was one of the early challenges I had, but I was really pushed to figure that out. And that was something I'd never confronted before when I was working on an academic project. When I picked topics, it was always things that had happened and that were well researched. So you didn't always have trouble finding source material. And sometimes the authors had already done the job for you of organizing it into topics that you could easily pull from and then just apply. But here you had to do all of that. You had to arrange it yourself, figure out what topics you needed, and then figure out how you were going to apply it to your thesis. So that was a great academic exercise for me.
Yeah, and it's a great opportunity to also, put out a lot of things that you've been working on in other classes into practice, but sort of take control and really push out there. You might not be, you might be doing a little bit of independent original research, but not necessarily always in the capstone, but your approach to the problem and which lenses you're going to put on it from the different disciplines you studied is always really unique to the student in their capstone, which I think is really cool. So there's a lot of fascinating things out there. And I think to then take out something like that, to pick a famous historical exercise in jurisprudence, if you'll call it that, or lack thereof, in the Salem witch trials in early America, and consider how that relates to the conversations and the actions that happen around, January 6th. They're two sort of very different, but really pivotal events. And to make that kind of connection, you might not normally do if you're getting a master's in political science or a master's in history or a master's in gender studies. You might talk about one of those things, but probably not both, and you wouldn't pull them together. So that's actually, really cool. It's exciting that you had a chance to do that. Super. Any final parting comments from any of the panelists?
You won't regret doing the program because you'll learn so much about yourself. Like, it's a lot of work. It's a major commitment, but it was besides going to law school, it was the best decision I made, especially in the academics. I was really amazed by how much I transformed and grew over the course of a year and a half. It's always exciting for me to figure out how I can apply the skills I've learned to the things that I do in my daily life. And that's been wonderful for me.
Super. Thanks, Emily. Okay. Well, thanks everybody. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to jump on and talk to us and let us record this to share with folks. I really appreciate it. I think it's the kind of information coming from, alumni, from students who did the program, who took different kinds of courses and figured out what it meant to them and how they were going to use it is really kind of information that's not easy to get for students when they're thinking about making a decision like this to commit themselves to a program like the Master of Liberal Arts. So I really appreciate you spending time with us, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Have a great night, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.